This is a Blogging Good News update about the recent panic buying and petrol crisis caused by the proposed petrol tanker strike. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to Blogging Good News. Now, I would like to talk about the fuel crisis that has been provoked by fuel tanker drivers proposing to go on strike. Now, when the strikes were first proposed, the government was very quick to get people sort of motivated to go out and fill up jerry cans and store them in the garage or around the home, and always telling people to fill up at the end of every day and never drop below a half tank of fuel to make sure they had enough. But now the government has changed its stance about their original advice, and they're now saying there's no need to fill up when you get down to a half tank of fuel, and the fire service has warned people against storing petrol in jerry cans in their homes or even in their garages because it is a health hazard, and the government were pretty foolish to suggest to people that they should store petrol because of course it is a very flammable liquid. On Thursday, diesel sales were up 77% on the normal sales of the day, and unleaded sales were up 172% because people were panic buying. And because of this, many stores and stations have now either run out of petrol or awaiting petrol deliveries or face huge queues, although that is now said to be easing. The fuel tanker drivers have said that there will be no strikes over Easter, and that they are focused on talks rather than strike action, as they would prefer to talk with the government and their bosses to get something worked out. But as well, going back to the government's original advice to fill up your tanks, it is becoming extremely expensive now to fill up our tanks with the recent fuel price increases. It is becoming very expensive to fill a tank up completely. A typical family hatchback would maybe cost about £80 to fill up, and if the government is advising you to go back and fill up at the end of every day, then that must mean the government are making profit out of this, with all the panic buying. Apparently, the government is making, during the panic buying days, the government was making an extra £32 million on fuel duty, which is a staggering amount. Now, especially now that there will be no strikes over Easter, and basically the petrol that people bought when panic buying will be used up by the time, if any, strikes are actually established. And just going back to the dangers of storing petrol in your house, a woman called Diane Hill suffered 40% burns when she was decanting petrol between two jerry cans in her house. And she had the stove on, and the petrol fumes were ignited by the stove, and she suffered 40% burns whenever the petrol ignited her. So you'd have to really ask yourself, was the government actually right in suggesting people to go out and store petrol in jerry cans, and also with their advice about filling up the tank? Some people are now thinking that there was really no need to go up and fill your tanks, and that the government might have just been doing this to get more fuel duty and to provoke panic buying. So because a huge proportion of petrol sales are down to duty and tax and VAT and all of that, because over in America the price of petrol is fairly low, but whenever you get over here to the UK, petrol prices are very high because of this country's very high rate of tax and very high rate of VAT and duty. So you'd have to wonder, is the government actually now trying to get in more money by provoking panic buying and just using the tanker driver strikes as an excuse. As well, you would have to question the advice that government gave people, because, obviously, in the case of Diane Hill, she suffered horrendous injuries because probably by following government advice to store jerry cans filled with petrol in the home. And, the fire service is now saying this is completely against safety standards. So you would really have to question, was the government right by giving this advice, and have they made a complete mess of this? Now, thankfully, there hasn't been much panic buying here in Northern Ireland, and it has mainly been in England where this has happened. But I know that in Asda yesterday there was queues for a brief time, although that could be because Asda's petrol is a bit cheaper than everywhere else. But the panic buying now seems to be easing. Queues on the forecourts are now easing, and there will now be no strikes over Easter, as the tanker drivers are committed to talks and they would like to prevent strikes if possible. This has been a Blog and Good News update. Thank you for watching and good night.